My name is Marcie Brozyna. Actually, it's Reverend Marcie Brozyna. I'm a Presbyterian minister and a hospital chaplain, and I live in Glens Falls, New York. So my piece was inspired for my very strong reaction to then candidate Trump attempting to discredit Megyn Kelly after the Republican debate where she had questioned him about the sexual assault allegations. And he was being interviewed, and his response was, oh, she had blood coming out of her eyes. She had blood coming out of wherever. And I knew that the blood coming out of wherever was supposed to imply menstruation, and that she was crazy because she must have been on her period. And so she was asking him crazy questions, like sexual assault allegations, and trying to discredit her through saying menstruation makes women crazy and implying that women are just crazy and you can't listen to what they say. And I was so deeply offended, and I very much wanted to create art then that was somehow a counter to that, and that would celebrate women and celebrate menstruation. And I was trying to think, and I was walking out of the hospital that I had worked in at the time, and I was almost to my car, and I stopped in the parking garage, and if anyone saw me, they would have laughed because I went like, oh. And with that, I decided I was going to embroider on pads, and that I was going to use menstruation as a symbol of creative power and creative potential and women's contribution to our country. I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do for the actual content. And I, in working with the patriotic theme, decided, all right, well, this is perfect. My first project is going to be the Betsy Ross flag, because here we have a flag that represents the inception of our nation, created by a woman. And I love embroidery because it is embroidery and fabric work and fiber art is like women's work, women's art. And so I love the tie back to that. And I also just think the Betsy Ross flag is really beautiful. I prefer it to the 50 stars because it's the circular 13 colony stars is really visually pleasing to me. So I thought, all right, I'm gonna embroider the American flag onto a pad. The red is perfect because it symbolizes both part of our nation and also menstruation. And of course, being on menstrual products, that's, you can't get any more clear with symbolism with that. So I did my little tiny flag, and then I thought, all right, well, I want to do something big. And so I started working on this flag, the blood coming out of her Betsy Ross, which is the title of this piece. I think I started working on it in 2000, certainly by 2016. A little bit at a time, a lot of trial and error, figuring out how to efficiently get the red pads filled, realizing that my sewing machine needle would get gunked up if I tried, and it was wrecking my sewing machine. Hand sewing it was very intensive, and I thought, oh my gosh, I will be dead before I finish this. So for a lot of the red parts, I just did a simple chain stitch with embroidery floss from thrift shops, from sales, from wherever I could find it, and then hand tacked it down onto the pads. And that proved to be the quickest method, and it gave me the texture that I wanted. And I worked on this for 7 years, maybe? I mean, a long time, little bit at a time. And yeah, it was just really a labor of love and frustration. I'd leave it in the basement for a long time and then come back to it. And in that period, my husband and I had a stillbirth with our first son. And as a hospital chaplain, I had always worked around pregnancy loss, and I had worked to support women and other people who could be pregnant and families around that tragedy of stillbirth or miscarriage, infant death. So it had always been important to me. And then once I experienced it myself, it's really it's a core part of my identity. And for my chaplaincy board certification renewal, I have to do a lot of continuing education. And so I chose at that point to focus on continuing ed surrounding pregnancy loss, stillbirth, maternal mortality. And in doing that research, I realized that we have the worst rates of the more developed nations for maternal mortality. So we have the worst. We have one of the worst for stillbirth and infant death. And for women of color, especially for Black women, it is even more intense and high. And also I learned that a quarter to a half of these deaths are preventable. And when I learned that, it really became my mission to honor my son Rumi, who passed, through raising awareness and hopefully helping to prevent a death like his or the death of a mom. And so that's the passion that I have, and that's why one of the reasons I'm so honored to have won the Best in Show award. One is just because it's an honor anyway, and to be around such wonderful art and have my art recognized. I was thrilled to just be in the show. Like, that was such an honor, and I was so excited. And I was so thankful, again, to be recognized, but also to have the opportunity to speak up about these tragedies and to lift up that it's so important to listen to women/pregnant people when they think that something's wrong, and to empower them to speak up and to not leave the practitioner's office until they receive the help they need. And also so important for the medical community to listen and pay attention and to know that pregnancy loss, especially stillbirth, like stillbirths, many of them can be prevented, and it takes clinicians taking that idea seriously for that to happen. And so it's just so important to me, and I'm so incredibly thankful to have this opportunity to share that message. And like I said, it gives me meaning. It helps me cope with the loss of my son, and this is his little baptismal ring. And I wanted to wear it today to remind myself of his spirit and his memory, and doing the good work out of love for him and hoping to spare others what I have been through.